You are listening to the Enormocast.
Is there any fashion statement in climbing more controversial than shorts? Yes, dear listener, I mean short pants, knickers if you will. Too short, too long, too much booty, too little leg, too baggy, and just too darn tight. Well, Guten Tag, Wolfgang. Is that a number 2 Camelot in your pocket, or are you just glad to see me? But in the end, when you do find a pair of shorts you love, it's like a dream pie filled with real dreams. And of course, Black Diamond is here to help you find your dream shorts. From the lightweight flat iron to the bomb-proof Valley shorts, Black Diamond has men and women's shorts for under the harness or a breezy bouldering sesh. The new Dirtbag short even comes in a retro corduroy option, so you can look just like you rolled out of a hazy VW bus in Camp 4 circa 1977. So let's think about replacing those thin, blown-out, ratty standbys with some new forever shorts from blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop. Because frankly, we can see your butt right now.
Well, howdy, partners. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a Yeti Yonder water bottle, and I hold the very key to life right here in my belly. That's right, water. Hydration. Why, without my tasty profferings, you'd have popped your clogs long ago, buckaroo. Now you might say, well, big deal. I got my own skanky big mouth scuzz bucket water bottle clipped to my pack right here, with a locking carabiner, of course. And I'd ask you one simple question. How many holes? That's right. How many holes does your water bottle have? You see, most water bottles either got one big hole that makes the water dribble down your chin when your buddy gleefully taps the brakes while you're swilling, or one small hole that makes it nearly impossible to dump in your electrolyte protein drinkable veggies or whatever other snake oil you think might make you climb harder. That's right. I'm a Yeti Yonder water bottle. I'm lightweight, made from 50% recycled BPA-free plastic, and here's the kicker. I got 2 holes. One for filling, one for drinking. You might be thinking, yo, Yonder, how's that even possible? Well, check me out at Yeti.com or your favorite local outdoor retailer and see the magic for yourself. All right, I gotta giddy up. Be well, drink well, and stay wet with a Yonder water bottle from Yeti.
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
big
big place
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a big
nice.
place. You sold it out. 20,000 seats.
You really should.
The hell are you doing? I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Bad weather. No, later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, La Sportiva, and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is July 1st, 2023, about 3:30 in the afternoon, and this is episode 266 of the Enormocast. A conversation with former back alley BMX rider, current rigger and stagehand, and of course climber, Erik Hingerty. And this is sort of the second in a row of everyday climber dudes. And both Drew and Erik are the kind of climbers loving it from the inside out, not getting too hung up on grades, pushing themselves, but looking to have a good time, meet people, enjoy the community. People often ask me for sort of the every person interview, when I'm banging out the superstars like the Steve Houses and whoever else. So here you go. There is a bit of an angle here. I do love these sort of culture comparison ones, About this time last year, I talked to Dustin Bowen, who was a bull rider, and had a lot to say about the comparisons of the sort of dirtbag bull riding scene and the climbing scene. A fair amount of people enjoyed that one. And so here we are back again. Erik got in touch with me because he's a stagehand, and he saw a lot of parallels in his climbing, what he's doing with rigging and being at these festivals, rigging stages. He also thinks it's maybe like a kind of a good angle for a climber that's looking for work that takes him, her, or they all over the country. And I think all of us climbing podcasters, we worry about having on big names so we can get listeners and people recognize them. But, one thing I've learned in 12, 13 years of whatever is going on with this thing is that you guys will show up, dip in, and check out some of the people you don't even know. Never heard of them. And I'm pretty sure you've never heard of Erik Hingerty. So I appreciate that. Dip in, check it out. I can count on you guys, right? Also, you may have noticed that there's a new sponsor here at the podcast, the Enormocast. Yeti is on board, sort of a climbing adjacent brand as opposed to BD or Sportiva. And, nobody has car camping dialed like us climbers, though. It's kind of like, I think people outside looking in think we're all up there in the mountains on bivy ledges or, deep in the woods on these cliffs and stuff. And the fact is we're car campers by and large. Like, we have to admit it. So Yeti fits right in there. Coolers, lots of stuff for camping, being on the road. And hopefully they'll stick around. I told them what I do, and I said it might get a little weird. And they didn't seem to bat an eyelash, but, they're going to hear that first commercial. Hopefully you stuck around for it. I think most of you guys do. And maybe have second thoughts.
Whatever do you mean, Chris? Did I say hole too many times? 2 holes is what makes me special.
All right, that's enough. They didn't pay for 2 spots. I don't even know what that guy is. It's like I watch these instructional banjo and mandolin videos, and when you hit some cat from like deep in South Carolina or something, a little bit of aristocracy sort of sound to his twang. I don't know. That's what I was kind of going. They're always really soft-spoken about their banjos. He's supposed to be playing a banjo. Did you get that part? Anyway, it was just because it's yonder, the word yonder, right? There you go, a little peek into the creative process. Anyhow, welcome aboard, Yeti. Hopefully you stick around. And you guys, if you buy something online or whatever, send a little note with it that you heard about it on here. That's how we keep all of these podcasts, every single one of them, from day one, open and free, is if you support the sponsors. All right, Erik. Erik swung through town on the way back from some EDM festival in Vegas, and we did this one on my deck. You hear my neighbor's lovely dog barking once in a while, but it's pretty good sound. Probably won't be distracting. Yeah, and it was nice to connect with someone who's a relatively new and inexperienced climber, and I say that only in reference to myself, because Erik knows what he's doing. Yeah, but it's nice to hear that perspective, that fresh, psyched perspective. No crust, no jadedness, just total stoke. From Erik Alleycat Hingerty. Imagine a time before the Sportiva TC Pro, before the Solution, even, dare I say, before the Mira. It was a libidinous time of skin-tight lycra and the shortest shorts ever conceived. Meanwhile, Sportiva was already at the height of their powers even then. Imagine, if you will, Ron Kauk flexing in his blue and fuchsia megas, Francois Legrand floating in his ridiculously tight kendos, and Heinz Mariacher, Mariachering in his Mariachers. But focus now. Steep climbing was being invented and Sportiva was there at the front, pushing standards and fashion to the moon. Now, Sportiva is celebrating those heady years with a revival of their Climbing to the Moon logo and a special limited edition TX4 approach shoe in the fantastic colors that defined an era. The TX4 remains legendary for both its ruggedness and its climbing power. And now, Sportiva is building the TX4 on a resolable platform to get even more life from your favorite approach shoe. So check out all of Sportiva's decades of innovation at Sportiva.com or your local shop and step to the moon in a pair of better than ever retro TX4s. stuff. You went to school for audiovisual?
Yeah, I went to Radford University. It was kind of like the party school for Virginia.
Did they call it the Rad U?
I probably did.
If they didn't, then they need to make those T-shirts immediately.
Yeah, it was like really focused on like local news though, but you could kind of take it where you wanted, you know, and all of my stuff was like BMX related because that's what I was doing at the time. Yeah, it was kind of behind the times. It was almost like I was learning to do stuff from the past. So when I like moved on into the future, I was a little left behind, but just that industry you have to keep up with on your own a lot anyway. So once you learn kind of the basics, you can apply that to everything new.
I think college is basically always like that.
Yeah, always behind the times.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, especially with tech. I mean, certainly like, you know, if you have a liberal arts degree like I do, it's like the literature is the literature. But yeah, with the tech stuff, I mean, it seems like by the time they've caught up, that whatever industry is long moved on. So, I mean, it's just looking for like a basic education that'll give you a platform to improve upon and to be able to, you know, to sit in that sphere and learn later on.
Yeah, it actually took me about 8 years after college to even get my first part-time job in that field. I was working at Good Morning San Diego for a little while. And yeah, it was just such a struggle because it was like part-time minimum wage, but like I knew that industry was like thriving somehow, but I never knew how to get my feet in the door, you know?
Right. Tell me about the BMX background.
That would happen when I was like 13 or 14. I started watching the movie Rad. I saw Matt Hoffman win the X Games with a broken foot, and I just thought that was like the most badass thing in the world. So I would just go out with these bikes, and it was like a brand new industry, so all the bikes were breaking and stuff, and I just kind of helped. Like I was just one of the main people out there just pushing the limits, and I never really got pro, but every time I would like get close to it or the magazines would come take pictures or whatever, I would start getting hurt. I'd like tear a lot of tendons, break a lot of bones and stuff. Like I ended up starting my own BMX company and just, you know, bringing my friends all around the country, and we just dirtbagged it around trying to sell T-shirts and stuff. So like later in life when I saw climbing, it just so appealed to me. I was like, this is the same thing I've been doing, because BMX I think has two different sides to it. There's like the contest side where everything's like trying to win money and stuff, and you got like your main pros, and that's cool and all, but there was like such an underground aspect to BMX. Like Ride BMX magazine was just driving around finding people that were out there doing stuff, and it was like the same with like Thrasher magazine. I couldn't skateboard for nothing, so, but it was just like that style of like underground kind of like, this was a sport but a lifestyle kind of thing, and it all relied on the people from within kind of creating it, you know. And the sponsors and the contests and stuff, they would like try to like capture it, but they often failed miserably, and the community inside would just be like laughing at it, but letting it happen, because, you know, if Huffy wants to try to sponsor some BMX riders, let them, you know.
Sure.
If you know, Toyota wants to sponsor this contest, like let them in some ways. So there was a little bit of a split in the community. There's some like they're super hardcore, no sponsors, and there were some that were like all about the sponsorships and stuff. So like you see mostly just the contest side of things now. I feel like the underground aspect has kind of died off with like the loss of a lot of the magazines and stuff. Like it hasn't really died off, but the coverage of it has died off.
Yeah, but has like social media changed any of that? I mean, I guess democratization of media that's been allowed by that, for good and bad.
Yeah,
you know, then all of a sudden, I mean, that, you know, climbing was the same way. Like the conduit to fame, if you will, or that kind of success was basically like 3 magazines.
Yeah,
for like 30 years.
Yeah,
and they were the gatekeepers in a, you know, close to literal sense. That if they decided that your climb or your personality or your thing was worth talking about, then that was like making it, quote unquote. And if they didn't, you know, there was really nowhere else to do it. But the social media has allowed, I think, people that have these whole careers that have no connection to any sort of editorial gatekeeping. And it reminds me a little bit, I mean, BMX has to have fallen into that whole skating thing of zines and things like that, where it was all self-produced media.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing I'm like so kind of stoked about with Ride BMX magazine, but also like the story of it's kind of sad to the ending of it, because it started with this guy, I think his name's Brad McDonald, and he would just make it out of his studio apartment in LA, and he was just like so dedicated to it, and he did it all on his own and had some friends or whatever working, and it all came from within. And then over the years, you saw it like get more and more corporate. I mean, it took 20 years before, like, I think Transworld bought it out. And then after Transworld bought it out, another company that owned the National Enquirer bought out all the Transworlds, like surfing, skateboarding, BMX, everything, and they shut them all down.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like how long ago was this? Like,
when they got all shut down was about 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, and so it's like the climbing. I mean, literally, that's the story of
the same
Rock and
story.
Ice and Climbing Magazine. Like,
exactly.
There's some version of them online, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and, but it's funny because it's like that just happened. It was just a precursor to, what happened in the climbing industry, essentially.
Yeah, and one day, I mean, like really soon, actually, I hope to try to bring back print media in some form. I want to include all sorts of these things, like, but I want to give a place for people to have pictures and stuff.
Right.
I'm gonna go home after this and start Alleycat's Adventure Club. It's kind of what I'm doing with it.
Well, that's cool. We can point people to that. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting angle because I always talk about, when you talk about climbing and why it's different than sports and we talk about it being a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking I always compare it to surfing, but then, skating fits in there. And then, I had never really considered BMX as part of that, but it's interesting to talk to you about this. Like it is, I mean, obviously it's very similar in its pursuit of, purity and versus sponsors and versus money and lifestyle and like who's the GOAT that's kept it real and all those sorts of things. I mean, these are all these like things that I think surfing went through, honestly, a couple decades ago already. And I think we're having this moment in climbing where we are actually kind of like feeling the growing pains of it.
Yeah.
And there is some level of rejection of what was, I think, sold to us and is always sold to everybody as like this great thing, like expand climbing and there'll be more opportunities and, there'll be more voices. And so then the government can't push us around as much. And that promise has its benefits, but then we're now reaping or beginning to sort of reap the negative parts of
a lot of backfire.
A constant promotion of this sport that has a limited resource to it.
Well, I'm part of that, actually. It was about 4 or 5 years ago that climbing blew up. And I told you I just listened to the signs of the universe, and a lot of times it's maybe just the radio or what everybody's talking about at the same time and just synchronicities. And it was about 5 years ago, I think, my dad showed me the Dawn Wall, and like he always shows me movies, and 9 out of 10 are like a total miss. Like I would never watch that. Like why are you even? But this one, I was just like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like it's brought me back to my childhood. Not like when I was a young teenager. My uncle like took me out to Yosemite, and there was another movie I saw. It was a Valley Uprising, amazing film. And it just like, I was like, I love Yosemite. I was there when I was a kid a lot. Like, my uncle took me on this crazy hike. We were just stuck out there for days and went to the top of Half Dome, just hiking, on the cables route. And then, like, I think we went the longest way possible. We went from Glacier Point down through the right side. I think you have to cross over the top of this, like, waterfall area. And we had lunch right there, and there was like this bear that came down. I guess I was like 14, and I'm like blown away. This bear's chasing us for lunch. We give him our lunch, and then we take some pictures, and then we hike around to Little Yosemite, and they had like some tent cabins there or something, and we stayed there. I think there was like a lottery or something. My uncle was always so lucky to get those things. we stayed there, and then the next day we went up to the top of Half Dome. I was like terrified of heights, like totally just gripped to the point of like, why am I even doing this? But for some reason, I just went to the top. I stood on like that little corner piece as close as I could to the edge. I think that really helped me kind of a little bit, but that fear still stayed with me for years. You know, like as a BMXer, you only go maybe 10 or 15 feet in the air, sometimes like 20 feet off of like a big ramp, but even still, like that's rare. So yeah, so that was just a cool moment, like experiencing Yosemite. And then when I saw those movies, I was just like, that's my new passion. Because after 25 years of riding BMX, or 20 years or whatever it was, I was kind of like over all the injuries. I wasn't really pushing my limits anymore. And I needed like a new passion. And I felt like I poured my whole passion into climbing. And it wasn't long that I realized that I wasn't the only one doing that at the time. I mean, all these people, like everybody's like, oh, you have to see Free Solo. And
Right.
I'm like, okay, cool. And like all these people that I would have never expected to be into climbing were now telling me these things. I don't really know. Like I found it in my hometown of Richmond, Virginia. There was like this little rock quarry. And I think they brought it for like the kids at like I think it's called the Passages Camp or something like that. It's just like a kids camp. But for me, I was like, oh, cool. There's bolts on the wall. I think they're left over from the 90s and stuff when people would just start climbing there. So there's the old routes that were kind of like, I don't know, 5'6", 5'7", I guess. And they were just really fun to learn to top rope. And then we had the Manchester Wall, which is this old bridge abutment, I guess. It's made out of stones that were pulled out of that quarry in the 1800s. And so that, I think it was like a train bridge that was burned down in the Civil War or something, and then they rebuilt it, it burned down again. So we just have these pillars going all the way across the river, and we have a giant wall on one side, and there's bolts all the way on all of it. So you can reach over and set up top ropes. And I just went out there and I learned how to do all this stuff on YouTube. And to me, in my head, I was like, I know this is sketchy, but I want to climb with other people. And if I'm going to climb with other people, I want to make sure I'm testing these systems on myself first, you know? And so then I started doing all that. And then I went to the gym and I met a lot of people. We had a really great climbing gym there. And it like had, you know, good classes and just a great scene where everybody was talking with each other. I made a lot of really good lifelong friends there. But I started talking to people, and none of them had been climbing outside. They'd been climbing for like a year or so, and none of them. I'm like, I've been climbing for a week. I can take you outside.
They're like, okay.
So like we go out and we top rope and stuff, and like eventually start to learn to lead some of these routes and stuff. And nothing over like 5'7", 5'8". There was some 5'10s that we top rope and everything. It was a really cool wall to just learn. You're basically climbing the mortar in between these stones, and since it was like rough cut, like from the 1800s, there's like just chunks to grab onto everywhere, good holds everywhere, and some of the routes are actually pretty bare fun. So you can put nuts in the wall and climb it kind of on gear and stuff. And like we just learned all kinds of stuff out there. So it was just a great way to learn. But then a lot of the hardcore climbers from the gym were always like, you got to go to the New River Gorge. You got to go to Seneca Rocks. So it was like my birthday that year. And I hit up my friend who had been talking about trad climbing since like the 90s and stuff. And I was like, all right, we're going to go trad climbing at Seneca Rocks. And he was like, well, I really haven't done it for a while. Maybe we should hire a guide. Probably the best idea ever. And so we go and we hired Troy was his name. He's an awesome guy. And he took us up. He just took one look at us and was like, you guys are pretty strong. I think you can climb some actual routes here. So we went up what's called Le Gourmet, and it transversed into Front C, which is a 5'6", and it feels like you're climbing like the wheel from Price is Right, almost. Like if that were to be stationary, you're like So it starts off kind of hard, and then like it gets easier and easier. But like at the top, I'm like, that's only 5'6". He's like, welcome to Seneca Rocks. This is old school grades. So then we go up what's called critter crack. My first opportunity to crack climb and stuff, and I was just blown away by it. You know, just following. I think I was in the middle of this. We did like a trio where he led. I was tied to the middle, and I had to clip all the gear, so I'd at least get to see everything. You know, and that was just fantastic experience, just learning how to trad climb, and I was just hooked ever since. Even though like I haven't really pushed into the harder grades yet, mostly because I keep getting hurt. I had to have like another surgery right in the middle of climbing. I think I got distracted from the original thing that we were talking about, the surge of climbing at that time and how I became part of it.
Yeah, I want to actually, there's a whole bunch of things I wanted to comment on in there, but I also want to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, this sort of BMX analogy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when I talk to people on this thing that didn't grow up in like a mountain culture.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, found climbing. And it's, I mean, that's really like, I mean, maybe people get tired of me asking this, but it's like, it's so essential to what I want to understand about people. But deeper in that with you is whether you got into BMX, or if I talk to someone that gets into skating or they get into climbing, a lot of times it's because they were looking for something, right? And those things, I almost said sports, or not sports, those things a lot of times offer a community. Like, I've talked to plenty of people who you know, walked into a gym and that was the first thing they felt as a kid, was like, oh, this is a place I can belong and I can be me, and I can like shuffle off these pressures that I feel at school or whatever happens to be. I mean, what was it that like you were looking for when you hit the BMX scene? And was it this idea that there's this group that I can fit in with?
I tend to make these like long-term decisions like right on the spot. You know, I tend to be like, I'm a BMXer. That's who I am now. I think it honestly was the movie Rad.
Right.
It's based on this character, Crew Jones, who fights the corporate man and joins the contest or the race anyway, and he wins the race, and he has to start his own t-shirt company to do it, and he ends up getting like the major riders to join his company instead. It's just like super wholesome. It's hometown hero kind of thing, you know. And it was actually kind of a big deal in the 80s, you know, this movie, and I got like a VHS copy of it in the 90s, and I was like, that's me. And like it was right when the X Games was coming out. And if you look into how the X Games really got started, it was this guy Matt Hoffman who in the early 80s, all these contests like just died off immediately. Like one day or 1 year they were winning trucks, the next year they were winning t-shirts and fanny packs, you know.
Right.
So they were like, the sport is dead. And Matt Hoffman was like, I'm not dead. So how can you tell me this is dead? Like, I'm still doing this. Like, I know a lot of people that are. And so he started doing these contests. He called them the BS contests because he was just he was bicycle stunt, but he knew what it stood for. And so all these people were just coming around from all the country. And then he took it to ESPN and he was like, I've got an idea for this contest series, and we're going to include skateboarding and rollerblading, and we're going to do the X Games. And they liked it, and he made sure that he started the Hoffman Sports Association, so he had full control of the X Games, or at least as much as possible throughout that whole thing. And they also joined on to the International Olympic Committee and helped get BMX as a sport into the Olympics. So I think it's almost a misnomer to not call them sports, because they're individual, almost non-competitive sports,
right.
You know, but you're competing with yourself. You're always trying to do better, and people are always stoked for you for what you can achieve. Nobody really cares that somebody else can do it better,
right?
Because it's like, good for that person, you know. But for you, good for you. You know?
Yeah.
Like, you did a 10-stair handrail. That's awesome. You know, who cares? Somebody can do 20 stairs, you know? Like right now we're celebrating your moment, you know? And I like that in climbing because we're celebrating our own individual accomplishments, you know? Like my first 5-7 trad climb, I celebrated, you know? I was like, give me a send beer, give me, like, we're chilling, like, this is awesome. I'm not climbing for the rest of the day. But that actually took me, it took me like 3 tries to get my first 5-7, my first big 5-7 trad climb, which also is a good story about my first whip on trad gear too. Because me and my friend, when I first tried to send this route, it's called Easily Flaky at the New River Gorge. And it's a beautiful route. You go up this like slabby little flake, and then you go over to the right a little bit, and there's like a perfect little horizontal slot. And you can put your hands in there, and you can get a perfect 0.75. And you go up a little bit to the left. You got to go up a few feet, and there's a perfect jug. But I reached in, and there was a pile of snow, and we wasn't supposed to be any precipitation, but for some reason the air was just freezing that day. It was 14 the night before. I don't know why we were out there. My friend just had a lot of stoke. That's my friend Adriel. He always gets me stoked on these adventures, just like, let's do it. It's not going to rain. Let's go. So I get my hand in the snow, and I just like totally give out and take a big old whip on this 0.75, but it just like showed me like I can do this. I did not complete the climb that day. I tried to go back up, and there's this no hands traverse you go across, and it's pretty easy because the feet are like good, but there was snow on them. I tried to like brush it off, and it turned to ice. And my friend, who's like a 512 climber, he's like, "Oh, you're just being a bitch. I'll go up and I'll finish it." And he gets up there and he's like, No, this is crazy. We're gonna have to wrap in from the top. And even like going up to the top, like the trail's usually like not that bad. There's like one part with a rope or whatever, but all of it was just frozen over, and it was the sketchiest stuff. It was great. I love getting into those adventures with Adriel.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, it's cool too. Like you found, I'm sure it was kind of, you know, a discovery. Like, okay, you're gonna climb, and then all of a sudden you find these walls right around Richmond, and then I think people who have like it's not a mountain culture. You're not exposed to climbing the way you would be if you grew up in Colorado.
There's no mountains
and so it's like
Richmond.
I always find it interesting because people then realize that there's what do you mean there's climbing, like, and there's this place called the New River Gorge, which unbeknownst to you is one of the like great climbing areas of the world.
Yeah,
you know. And it's just funny because I think people like are like, what now? There's this place where now? And like you get there and like your eyes as a climber are a totally different vision than had you gone there as a kid or whatever. And you're like suddenly like, oh my God, this is like a climbing paradise. A weekend trip from Richmond.
Yeah.
And it's right there, and it's always been there. And you had like no concept of it.
No, but I think it's the same with BMX,
Right.
how me and my friends, we would pack up the car and go to some obscure little town that had this amazing skate park. And like the locals didn't even know how amazing it was. They'd just be playing around in the bottom of this like half pipe or something. And
Right.
we'd be like, get out of the way. We came 8 hours to ride here.
That's actually Carbondale.
Yeah.
Before you go, dude, you got to run over and see this ridiculous skate park that we have here in this tiny little town.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about the skate parks in Colorado.
I mean,
yeah,
it's crazy. Like, it is such an advanced feature that's over there. It's just like a few blocks from where we're sitting. And it's kind of bonkers you'll see.
Yeah.
It's a trip.
Some of the pro BMX riders, I think Troy McMurray rides over there.
Yeah,
sometimes.
people come. It's the same thing. They show up and are like, and they've had like contests over there and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because Miles and I go over there and hang out and kind of goof around in it because almost nobody is ever riding it because it's too advanced for like most of like your local Joe sort of skaters and BMXers.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, someone's actually in there riding it the way it's supposed to be ridden, not just goofing around in the bottom like we do.
Yeah.
But it's funny because it's really intimidating.
Oh, I'd probably have a blast there, but
yeah.
It's just every time I start doing that, I'll start getting like really good again, and then in the back of my mind, I'm like, you almost lost your foot doing this, or you gave yourself a heart attack in a BMX crash. Like, stop doing this.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the injuries sounded gnar.
Yeah. It's just a really long list.
Right.
I think it has to do with a lot with nutrition, because when I was in high school, and like the first couple years of college, I was just not eating well, and I didn't know about like strength training or anything. That's something that's extremely missing in BMX, and I'm really thankful to find it in climbing is training and nutrition and keeping your body healthy. Like in BMX, nobody cares, they just go out and send it, and
right.
don't even stretch half the time,
Yeah.
And so, there's this whole different mentality when somebody comes and they show up, start stretching.
Well, I think it's
working out.
probably, I would imagine, because I mean, there's, you were talking about how it sort of died in the 80s, at least as a competition thing. I mean, it's certainly back, and like Red Bull and companies like that have a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
And when it becomes a bigger deal and there's a lot more money involved and things like that, I mean, that's when these people turn into athletes, and they're like, okay, yeah, it was fun, like, just partying and raging and BMXing, but now I'm a professional and I'm gonna, like, maybe take some time, and some of these pros, I'm sure, have trainers and the whole thing. And climbing has been the same way of like, it's gradually grown to where it's been infused with this whole training thing, but it's also a bit of a split in the community, because it's like there's those who train and there's those who kind of don't, and there's a little bit of a, those who don't are like, they're wasting their time and they've taken the fun out of it. And I have a foot in that world,
Yeah.
And then there's the training people who are looking at these sort of other folks like, why are you wasting your time? And you should do some hangboarding and you'd be better. And so now I would imagine, and I know that BMX, surfing, skating there's that split in there as well.
Yeah.
And because I mean, if you look at what people are doing off of big ramps on their bikes now, like, it's bonkers. Like,
it's circusy.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, an advancement in like athleticism in a lot of ways.
Well, it is and it's not,
Okay.
because I mean, in like the most amazing things have ever happened in the backwoods of like Pennsylvania and stuff like that, where it's like they just go out and build these giant jumps. And we call them trails because there will be like 10 or 12 jumps in a row.
Right.
And they all get consecutively bigger. And this one guy, Mike Aitken, he was like my absolute hero. He would do these crazy tricks just in the backwoods, not like for any sponsors or contests. He was doing it for a video part. And that's like what we really, as a community, really loved, is when we got these video parts from these riders. And he crashed so hard, I mean, he paralyzed half of his body, like the left half of his body, I think, which, I mean, he ended up walking out of the hospital like 6 weeks later, but it was absolutely incredible. But, I mean, that to me was like feats of athleticism that is just absolutely incredible, that you're not seeing that on live TV.
Right.
And even the ones that they're doing it for live TV, it's kind of different. It's changed for this like circus act, or to be like a spectacle for the crowd or whatever. It's not really for the riders themselves anymore. Although some of it is, but you know what I mean? Like, I'd much rather see like a no-footed can or a 360 one-footed tabletop than whatever new trick our Willie's doing, and he was a scooter guy anyway, so it's like
scooter guy, trad climber, sport climber, whatever. It's like there's always these factions, That's so funny.
Yeah, it's always the same.
The analogy, like the BMX analogy, goes a ways, but it only goes so far, and that's kind of the interesting thing about some of those other sports, is that I mean, unfortunately, and maybe you can correct me, is it seems like there's definitely sort of an age limit in the sense of hucking yourself, because I think like wrecking yourself, unfortunately, seems to be almost like a part of it.
Yeah.
And it's like a part of the mentality in it as well, of like, go bigger until you fucking wreck yourself. And if you can do something rad right before that, like,
yeah, well,
you know what I mean? And it's like,
that was
and
my problem.
Therefore, yeah, and you're an example of it. Like, your body just can't take it. anymore. And the thing, like I said, the analogy falls apart is that climbing just isn't like that.
That's why I came to climbing.
Yeah,
I was like,
exactly.
this would be safer. If
Yeah,
I
totally.
mess up, it's only one crash. That's all I get. If I
Right.
fall really bad and die, that's it.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's sad to say, but it was like with BMX, you can like paralyze yourself. You can break bones to the point you wish you were dead. You know, like when I tore my foot, I almost lost it. The pain was so severe. It took me a year to walk again.
Right.
And so that's always in the back of my head riding my bike. When I'm climbing, I'm like, it hurts, but I'm not going to tear it off again.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
I mean, as long as you keep your shit together and like are on the safety program, and that's like, again, you know, thinking about the cultures and everything else, like, yeah, I find it actually, if you sort of take that kind of, you know, rip or die sort of mentality with climbing, I personally find, and they're out there, people are out there that are like that. It's off-putting.
Well, for me, it's just
know?
like I'm going to do everything extra safe.
Right.
So, like, I don't care if I sew up that crack, you
Right.
know, like, I don't have any pride with that.
Yeah.
You know, if I put
Well,
a piece every 2 feet, so
you know,
what? But if I can
yeah.
run it out, like, obviously I'm gonna, but.
Well, I mean, there's a little bit of like sort of ego in that, but by and large, nobody cares.
Exactly.
Like no one's gonna be like, oh well, he put 8 pieces in and I only put 7 in, so
Yeah.
like that exists maybe in some very small-minded sort of people. But the
Yeah.
thing is that with again, like some of these other sports, like the whole like pushing it is really in the fabric of what you guys were doing. Like,
Yeah.
I want to go higher next time because I managed to pull that off. So now I'm going to like huck harder next time.
Every single time.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
literally like, and throughout the day, you know,
Mhm.
I'm just like, I will ride my bike until I crash.
Well, and the thing is, and I've used this with like kayaking and stuff too, is that pushing yourself in climbing, which we do, it is part of our culture, right? To try harder. You were talking about like, oh, sometimes we try 5'10", even though we'd get beat up on it or whatever. Or you were talking about climbing with your friend who climbs 5'12". Like, yeah, he'd put me on those things anyway.
Yeah.
There's no extra danger in that, unless we're talking about like really specific trad climbing, you know. But generally speaking, and for the most part, whether you're top roping a 5'10" or a 5'13", it makes no difference in the amount of danger, the amount of risk, or the consequences. And in fact, it's been noted on this show a bunch of times that taking a whipper on a 5'7" is way sketchier than taking one on a 5'13".
Yeah,
because it's usually like on your 5, 6s, and 7s, there's things to bounce off of. And
Well, 5'6",
Yeah.
I've learned is sketchy.
yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like do not fall on that because you're gonna
Yeah.
like clunk the ledge below you and then roll off that jug and then like bang your ankle into that other thing that's sticking out. And,
Yeah.
you know, your 513C next door is completely clean and overhanging, and you just fall into air.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting like. Again, it's like the analogies only go so far because climbing has this whole aspect to it where you can push yourself physically and not necessarily have to take more risk. And I think that's what fits with sort of being a little bit older and still trying to climb hard, injured, fucked up. Anyhow, but one of the main reasons that you wanted to come on the show and you know, that we started talking was kind of that you really wanted to talk about how you feel like you partially cracked the dirtbag code with what you do for a living at the current time.
Yeah, I get to climb stages. I get to
yeah.
climb for work, and it's in one of the coolest environments in the world.
Yeah. So let's start talking about that, and we'll kind of weave it all together here.
Well, actually, it's also related to to my BMX life because all through my life, I've been kind of dirtbagging it, you know, trying to live on the fringe of society. Like, I didn't want to get that real job kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to somehow make it otherwise. I ended up going, I did have a degree in production. I had one part-time job in television, and most of the time I was working in kitchens or making pizza, which, you know, doesn't really get you very far in life. I mean, it gets you a job anywhere you go, but it doesn't pay your bills very well.
Right.
And I even went to culinary school. It didn't increase my pay that well. So I lost another job, and I was bitching about it. It was during the pandemic, too. And it was like right after like restaurants were opening again. And I was like, I'm sick of this restaurant thing. And then I had a Facebook only friend. Her name's Clutch. She hit me up. She's like, I got something for you. You should stagehand with me. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I'd already spent a lot of the pandemic doing a lot of climbing with my friend anyway. So I was getting a lot better at just being around a lot of this stuff. But I still didn't know what I was getting into at the time. So Clutch gives me like the rundown. And at first it's just stagehanding. So she's just telling me like all about industry standards, how you're going to get a break every 2.5 hours. If you go to work and get sent home, you get paid for 4 hours minimum. Usually it's going to be 10-hour days. They're going to give you catering after 5 hours, or else if they don't after 6, they're going to give you a meal penalty. She started telling me how to interact with these people. Like, don't try to take things out of a girl's hand, especially if it's just some little girl. Don't be like, oh, let me help you with that, sweetheart, because she's probably got it. You can ask like, hey, do you need help? You got that, or whatever.
She's a stagehand and her name is Clutch.
Yeah.
You don't take shit out of her hand.
Exactly. And she was pointing out how the girls got to work twice as hard in order to get noticed and stuff.
Right.
So just let them work twice as hard, And if they ask for help them, but just treat them like everybody else. And she was telling me how to lift things, how to carry heavy things, lift on 3, all this stuff.
Here, move your mic covers a little bit, or
So yeah, Clutch gives me like the rundown and everything, and then all she did was give my number to some people, and then she went off to some other gigs. She hadn't even been home in months, so she was just jumping in and out. I'm like, this lifestyle is awesome. This appeals to me. So a couple weeks go by, I get a phone call. I show up to the gig, and nobody even knows I'm there, so it's kind of like, you have to do it on your own. I'm telling people, I'm like, no, I'm supposed to be here. I'm here to help break this down. I'm here for loadout. Finally get my wristband and meet the guys and everything. And we tear down the stage. And I'm like, okay, that was cool. I didn't really know what I had done. It was Lock-In Festival, but I wasn't part of the festival. I just saw like one stage. I was like, okay, that was cool. I think it was Tedeschi Trucks Band or something was the first gig. And then
wait. So you just turned up. Like, you don't have a certification?
No, not yet.
Right, so you're just like, I'm muscle.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do.
She says,
things.
Show up with a hard hat, a C-wrench, a crescent wrench, a hammer, which you're going to find out right away is the wrong hammer,
right.
and steel toe boots.
Cool.
So hard hat, high vis, C-wrench, and a hammer, and steel toes. So I showed up, and I was ready to work, and I didn't know what I was doing yet. And so
that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then, a couple weeks later,
did you scuff your shit up a little bit?
No, okay. I should have.
That's like a climber thing too. Like, oh, that guy's got a whole brand new rack.
Exactly.
I don't know about him.
Yeah,
like,
we see all the
clear
newbies.
of that cat. So
the next gig was the Blue Ridge Rock Festival, and I was like, okay, it's in Virginia. It's probably some small rock and roll festival or whatever. And I get there, I'm like lost in the tobacco fields. The boss finally finds me. He's just like shaking his head, like, what? This guy? Okay, we got a new guy. And then, so we get in there, and it was like a couple of days of like building the stages. They were like the pop-ups. They're called stage lines. They come on the back of a truck, and they just unfold into a stage. And then I think I was on barricades, so we just put the barricades up in front of the stage. I still had no idea what was going on. Show call comes around. There's like rock and roll going on everywhere. I see Anthrax on stage. I'm like, holy crap, wait, where am I? And I finally started asking around. I'm like at the biggest rock and roll show in the country, at least on the East Coast. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, what's happening right now? How did I get in on this? They just needed labor. It was just a labor company that was providing for the staging, for the stages. So I started to figure that out, but the labor company was just inviting people to the next gig. If I could make it, I did pretty well at this one. And actually, like, I got off work at like all the right times. I don't know, like, if the universe was looking out for me, but my first day off, I was like, I got to see Rise Against. I'm like, that's one of my favorite bands in college. That's awesome. And then like the next day I got off right when Megadeth was playing. I'm like, this is so cool. And so they invite us to Firefly Festival. I've never even heard of Firefly Festival, but it's this big festival in Delaware. So I'm like, cool, I'll go check that out. That was also another pretty big deal. Like, I think Billie Eilish was playing and Tyler, the Creator, and I was like helping their lighting team and stuff. And all of it kind of felt familiar because I'd worked a little bit in the news station, so I knew how to coil cables. This is one of the most important things, is learning how to coil cables. It's over under, not around the elbow.
It's funny you say that because every band I've ever been in, I've spent the entire years of the band, because I've also usually provided sound, like, you do your own sound when you're some local shitty band, and like trying to train the rest of the people in the band to fucking coil chords. It takes years for some people. You're just like, no, stop, like drop it, put it down.
Yeah,
let's try this again. It's funny because, and then also like there's such these indicators in climbing too. Actually you mentioned like come in and like if we were going to go climbing together, you're like, well, you better, it'd probably be good if you kind of got to know me and like what kind of belayer I was and stuff. And
yeah, I'm a great belayer.
I was like, you know what? I'll know.
You within a minute or two.
Yeah, within a few minutes, I'm gonna
fucking around with my carabiners.
have an idea, and I'm sure within that industry, it's the same thing. Like you can look at a guy across the stage and be like,
"Oh no, we got a green one."
Yeah, exactly. And you were that dude.
yeah, exactly.
But it's funny that coiling chords. I guess it is probably like when you see someone opening a carabiner with two hands.
Yeah,
like they have to do it with two hands. You're like, okay, hold up for a second. And the coiling of the chords is funny because it's such. Like this, I mean, every like painting has them too,
Yeah.
Like as soon as you see somebody do something like totally backwards, there's one or two things you're like, okay, we're dealing.
If all you can do is coil a cable, all the techs will love you and they will put you in charge of everything.
Yeah, so YouTube that before you show up the first day.
Exactly. And then I started doing all these cool festivals and people started talking to me about the riggers. I started noticing that people were in the air above us doing cool stuff. I had no idea what they were doing, but I knew that they had ropes and cool harnesses. These are 5-point harnesses.
Yeah,
They're not like the rock climbing harness. And you're not supposed to take a fall on these harnesses. So I'm in my head, I'm like, why am I paying $400 for a harness I can't even fall on? I could just use my rock climbing harness. But no, but
that's because they have those giant screamers, and you have to replace those things.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to get I got a V lanyard. I thought that was actually way more important because the Y lanyards are a little sketchier,
right.
But a V lanyard you could be hooked into only one piece and it's fine. Like if you were to fall, it's just gonna blow out separate, and you don't have to worry about breaking your back or anything. So it feels a lot like trad climbing, like really easy routes. But yeah, so the way I really got into it, though, is because we had gone to Austin for Austin City Limits. And I kind of got some crappy hours. And the boss I was working under, I don't know, he didn't like me or he didn't know me that well yet. He didn't know I was like for real about that industry. And so I was like, hey, I haven't heard about Vegas yet because we're supposed to be going to Vegas. And his exact words were, fuck off about Vegas. And I was like in tears. I like almost went under the stage and like started almost crying to my coworkers. And they were like, don't worry about him. You should go anyway. And I'm like, are you serious? I can just do that? And they were like, yeah, you can do that. So after the gig ended, I immediately got in my car and I just drove from Austin to Vegas. I was the first person there. I showed up and I was like, I'm not on your list, but I'm supposed to be on your list. And they were like, really? Come back tomorrow. I'll talk to your guy. I get there the next day and he's like, I got you. But I watch him turn away like 50 stagehands because everybody wants to work EDC Vegas. I mean, it's a really sick gig. But I walked it up and I was like, I want to be a rigger and I heard you can get all your stuff here. And he was like, come back tomorrow at 5 a.m. We'll suit you up. And I went in and he put me up as a rigger every single day. And I learned how to, I mean, I'm still like terrified of heights at this point. I'm like getting sent up in the boom lift. We're working with the crane like almost immediately. I'm putting lights up and stuff on the load in, but on the load out was like insane. We were like doing timber hitches and clove hitches and stuff. Bowline is like one of the most important knots in that industry. We almost never use it in rock climbing, but for stagehanding, that's all they use. Bowline and clove hitch. And for some reason, they call a girth hitch a choke. That took me a second. They're like, choke that off. I'm like, what are you talking about? So once I learned that they meant a girth hitch, so now I'm like, okay, cool. And the slings that they use are big industrial slings with galvanized aircraft cable in it. So you're using those, and you have to learn how to work with the shackles and stuff. But it's pretty cool. You get to use a protraction sometimes. It's like hauling techniques and stuff. I don't know. There's similarities to rock climbing, and there's a lot of differences, of course.
Right. Well, I mean, it's really kind of a famously climby line of work. You know, from like a lot of those Yosemite guys were brought on to do Hollywood stuff, which is a whole different thing, but a lot of the same ideas, doing rigging for Hollywood movies. And it was kind of the same thing where I think, or a similar thing where, you know, somebody in the industry was a climber like Dave Schultz, you know, it's continued to have a really deep career in rigging for films, or this guy Perry Beckham out of Squamish, and, you know, would do the same thing, like basically hook their climber bros up and be like, yeah, show up, we'll find a way to use you, you'll learn, if you like it, you can, you know, expand your skills and get your certifications and do all the things.
Yeah.
But basically, like, show up because I can trust you to at least know your way around ropes and heights and hauling systems and things like that. And it's always been a conduit there. And then Vegas, too, has been a famously, like, a lot of climbers because there's always work in the various casinos for the shows and all those sorts of things. So,
yeah.
But it sounds like you kind of went in a back door as opposed to, like, going straight to, like, heavy certifications and things like that. So where does your sort of level exist now? I mean, how long ago was this, you know, moment in Vegas where you just like basically like pushed the door open and walked in whether they liked it or not?
Yeah, that was about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
It actually took me a lot to learn how to rig, but I was going to every local show I could. I was taking rigging classes with their companies. I was just getting to know people. It's really just a who you know. And I realized that rigging is an industry that you just have to own it. You have to just show up and say, I'm a rigger. And then when the work comes, you just have to know how to do it. And you can ask around, you can learn kind of on the spot, but you have to own it the whole time. Yeah, it was just kind of like that mentality that kind of really helped me get into it. So I've got the certifications for the boom lift and everything. I'm starting to realize that a lot of rigging companies just offer their own certifications and their own classes and stuff. And some of it's like BS, some of it's not. So but I've been rigging with like the guy that wrote the book and stuff, you know, and all these people that are like teaching me like the ways of the industry so I guess I was on the fast track as well. Also with these festivals, I mean, we go in and we build everything from the ground up.
So, well, let's kind of like connect it to climbing. I guess the whole vibe is like trying to find a job where you can make money, but you can take time off, where you can travel. So where does it fit in for you with like, you know, basically what's kind of a nascent climbing, you know, lifestyle for you? You've only been at it for a few years. But how does it fit into the climbing?
Well, it kind of puts me in these new areas. And whenever I'm in a new place, I try to look up what the climbing might be like. Like, unfortunately, when I was in Miami, everything's flat, but they have a really awesome climbing gym. I don't have a lot of climbing partners, though. So a lot of times I'll just go out on my own and just kind of like do recon missions and find these walls and maybe take somebody there later or something. I've tried to take my wife to a couple places. Like when I was in Austin last year, or the year before last, rather, I found Enchanted Rocks and I found Monster Rock. I soloed this like 5.7 at Monster Rock. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, like it sucked because I was on my own and none of my coworkers, like even the riggers, they weren't rock climbers. They were like, I climb at work. Why do I want to climb after work? I'm like, we've got 4 days off. So I would just go find these places, but I would run into people like, recently, me and my wife were in Kansas City for the NFL draft. And, you know, Kansas, you think of flat. But, I mean, Kansas City, Missouri, I don't know. I looked it up on Mountain Project, and there's a limestone wall right in town, like 40, 50 feet tall. And there were people climbing there. So I made friends even. So I showed up, And my wife still kind of new at belaying, so she only belays me on like easier stuff. So this other guy belayed me on like a 5'8" or 5'9", I forget what it was, but I actually had a lot of fun just climbing that, and got to know those guys. And I'll probably go see them on the way back through. In Vegas, I got to try physical graffiti, and Amy's never done multi-pitch climbing, so I just brought her up, and we rappelled off the first pitch, but it kind of gave her a sense, and then she flew home to be with her dad. But then I took out one of my other rigging friends, and we tried to send it again. I just ran out of cams. We went back to buy more cams, but we decided to go to Mount Charleston instead, and I wanted to climb some of the cliffs there, so we were playing around a little 5'10" there. I actually took a nice little whip. I haven't taken a good whip in a while, so that was fun. But yeah, the different climbings and just all the different areas of the country, and I'm just getting started, And I'm just thinking this would be absolutely even more perfect if I hadn't I just got married, so I'm trying to pay some bills, and I'm working as much as possible. But if I wanted to take a little more time off, I totally could, and I could say, hey, let's meet up at this spot. I've got a week off. And it wouldn't hurt me financially, really.
Right.
So,
yeah, it sounds pretty cool. I mean, it harkens to a couple other people I've talked to, like Drew Smith. He talked about how he had worked on these rope choss mitigation crews on these highways, like out in California and stuff like that. But having the same issue of everybody else on the crew was just these hardcore blue collar dudes that wanted to spend their day off resting or drinking or whatever it was they were into, but it worked out for him. He ended up meeting some people from Patagonia when he was in Ventura working on the PCH, and so yeah, it's funny because you put your foot into this world, and you're like, why doesn't anyone want to do anything? What are you gonna do for 4 days? Gamble? Probably, right?
A lot of them did.
Yeah,
or just hang out.
Just chill. Yeah. It's no chilling. Let's go do something. I know it's interesting, but and then Alexis Krauss, who's the lead singer of Sleigh Bells, how she was sort of learning to climb and getting into climbing while she was on tour, and kind of the same thing of everybody else on the crew, it's chill, or day off, rest. And she was aggro to go find someone to climb with, and had the same issue of okay, well, where do I go? Who do I talk to? And Mountain Project and all these sorts of things. And the internet's probably super, super helpful compared to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But even showing up at the cliff is an age-old way to do it.
Yeah, learning how to be friendly and realizing that climbing is a community that wants to connect with people.
Right.
And so if you go up and talk to people, most of the time they're going to want to talk to you back. They're going to hit hey, having trouble finding the wall. Can I walk down with you guys? No problem. You can climb with us, whatever.
Right.
So it's just a really great way to connect with people. And, I do a little solo climbing, but I'd rather not, because when I would ride my bike all the time, it was to the point where I was always riding by myself, and I didn't push my limits. I want to be able to push my limits, and you can only do that with other climbers, or you can mostly do that with other climbers. You can dial things in on your own, but it's a lot harder. Only reason I got into that part of climbing, and mostly I think I was attracted to climbing anyway, was the gear.
Right.
I just instantly became a gear nerd.
Right.
I think when I was watching, there's that section in the Dawn Wall that shows you how the pitches and all work and stuff. So I was like, that's cool. And I was probably asking the classic, how did they get the rope up there and stuff? And I was just figuring these things in my head. So I think doing that, and if you can make those steps on your own and learn the systems on your own, that's a good sign of being a good rigger, because a lot of times you have to go up and make the decision on your own as a rigger. And I started to realize that too, that a lot of times there's set ways to do things, and then there's what the client wants. And then you're like, oh crap, I'm here. We're here to rigger it out. We came out here to make it up. We're making up the system that's going to make this work. And there's nobody else. There's nobody above us to make that decision. We're the ones making that decision. So that's where I think learning that gear and being a gear nerd really helps with rigging.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's tools. And, people as people follow my social media or whatever. No, it's I basically rebuilt an engine last month, and everybody's like, well, how do you do that? And it's mostly it's understanding obviously the mechanics of the engine and stuff, but it's also knowing how your tools work, and what they can do and what they're capable of. And because like when you run into a problem where you can't, I mean, the simple is like I can't reach that bolt to get a wrench on it, but you know it's in your toolbox. You know which extensions you have, which angled sockets you have, and stuff like that. And it's like knowing how your tools work is really like the key to all of it. And I think that's, I'm sure, for rigging, but it's also for climbing. It's like, these like hilarious sort of arguments I have online about the Grigri or about the quad anchor and all these sorts of things. That's like the basis of it. Like, don't just know what this thing does, but know what all these parts are capable of. And where they go and what they can do, what they can hold, what they're good for, what they're not good for. And, and rigging is, I think, that's the same thing. Like, you have all these tools, you have this task to do, which tools apply, which ones are going to be safe, which are going to be the most efficient. How do we get it done with these tools?
Yeah. And if you can get things done like that, you can get jobs because you get noticed. Right. And then you can just kind of just start hitting people up. You get phone numbers. And if you're in a town somewhere, you start asking people around. Say, hey, I'm in Minnesota or I'm in Texas and I want to work and then I'll be ready to climb on this day or whatever. You can kind of set your own schedule. And I don't have a Sprat certification yet, but a lot of people are like, you can get paid a lot more if you do Sprat. But that would kind of take me more out of like the festival scene. I like to travel and do these festivals right now. But
well, what's the Sprat?
So Sprat is it's like the rope access training. So a lot of that has to do with like permanent installations, or like if you're going to rappel in to do any work, or like using the rope on your body instead of like using it to pull something. Sure. So a lot of that, I think, is the equivalent of like aid climbing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like if you can set up your lifeline and the line you're going to be working on and stuff like that, that's the same as like setting up a belay and your slack and all that. So, and I don't even know a lot about like aid climbing. I've done a few like rope solo, like single pitch routes, on lead, but I can, see the similarities between how that would be a lot like Sprat certification.
So do the Sprat people look down their nose at the stage people?
They're just usually the ones, they're like the cleanup crew, like if everything goes wrong, if we get like the skins stuck in the keter track and stuff, like they're the ones that have to climb out on top and they're like tied to the boom lift like 20 or 30 feet away. And like if they fall, they're going to take a pretty big fall.
Oh, a little thunderstorm coming in.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm sure they're rolling their eyes then too, like, oh God.
Yeah, especially when all the newbies make mistakes. Because like Ultra Festival, we build this giant mega arch, and one of the things they like to do is drop off all the new kids in these like key positions up top where you can't really move unless you have like the appropriate gear, because like there's nothing to clip into, so you have to bring like a steel cable to clip into the purlins and stuff. And like you're basically stuck in this uncomfortable corner for like hours while they're waiting to bring up these giant skins to like run through the tracks and cover this arch. And they just love just dropping off the new people and seeing how they handle it. And then they all have to move to the next bay over, so they just watch them do it. And I guess the first year, that's exactly what they did to me. And I did pretty well because I was like, okay with walking on like sketchy little edges and stuff like that. Because learning to climb at Seneca Rocks and stuff like brought me to that higher level a lot quicker.
Right.
So,
well, let me ask you a little bit of a lifestyle question. The lifestyle aside from like the travel and the climbing, it kind of like I almost like have this like picture of like carnies in my head, and one of the things you're talking about is like, okay, there's all these people there. What do they do on their days off? How do you not get sort of sucked into what is probably, I mean, it's the same as working in a restaurant. Like restaurants are like gnarly and like these sort of drug fueled like kitchens and shit like that. So how do you sort of not really keep your nose clean in the sense of like, being a good guy, but like having the psych to be rested and to use your days off to climb and not get like caught up in, you're off there's a total like EDM scene happening right in front of your face. Like maybe I'll do that instead of like being ready to go climbing. Like what are your sort of strategies or, finding a balance of like being in both those lifestyles?
Yeah, we call them pirates. They call themselves pirates. It's like definitely a pirate lifestyle. And,
Right.
like I guess that's where they got like the knots and stuff. They claim rigging came from like boats and stuff.
Sure.
But, and yeah, there's a lot of people into drugs and stuff because this type of job just allows almost anyone because it's just a labor job.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, actually, I had to reduce my judgment of people because
Right.
I always tried to stay away from like hardcore drug scenes. Like my parents were kind of like into drugs and stuff, so it kind of like messed me up as like, or maybe it didn't mess me up. Maybe it just put me on the right track of like, don't do hard drugs ever, So like when I see people doing like cocaine and stuff, like I don't really see it, but I know that they're doing it. I try to like reduce my judgment and be like, okay, these are, just regular people or
Sure.
whatever. We'll hang out at work, but we're probably not going to hang out in the hotel together, I don't know. I'm just not that kind of person.
Sure.
Like I'm a huge pothead, but I don't even like smoke, like, cause I don't want to smoke after people either. Cause they're sharing their stuff with 200 other people. I'm like, they're all my friends, but no thanks. Like I'm just going to stick to my own scene. And then there's some of the like, yeah, pretty much everybody's a pothead, but like there's some people that are like super clean and like just normal people, and they're also in there. You got to pick and choose your friends.
Right.
It's been really helpful having my wife on the road, but like not like I would get into anything anyway. It's just been helpful for fun and for like let's go hiking instead, like on our day off, or let's go to a nice restaurant or something. Like we don't really party hard, So yeah, if you're a young kid, you can definitely get influenced, and I definitely see that a lot. And you just have to be careful because some people like to do ketamine all day at work, and they're, maybe running forklifts and stuff. And like, if you've ever done that, you would know it's absolutely ridiculous. But people that do it all day long, I guess it's not as ridiculous.
Right.
Just keep your eye out for those people. And, so it is a different lifestyle for sure. But I think it just attracts all different kinds of
Right.
people. And you can pick and choose who you're going to hang out with. But that being said, there's some of these festivals that are camping festivals. Like Okeechobee Camping Festival is amazing. And I mean, you're there, there's good acid around, whatever, But like, you just got to like be your own person and
Sure.
kind of make your own choices.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because like, there's all these considerations that go into, what kind of work you want to do or, these lifestyle choices that go with climbing and some of them are tricky. And again, like when I was talking to Alexis, being on the road with a rock band is, not conducive to getting up the next day and going climbing. And so you have to really like work at it to make the two things kind of fit together.
Yeah.
And, sometimes they can seem like this golden opportunity. It's going to work out great. And then a year goes by and you're like, I haven't climbed at all because I'm too wrecked all the time or whatever, working those construction jobs. Because construction's always been a big, that's a climber staple, right?
Yeah, because you can go make a bunch of money.
Yeah, but it also wrecks you, and it also like ruins your body. And it also is like hard to work, 5 days or 6 days a week and then climb on that day off when you're completely tired. So there's just considerations that go into all of it. But
yeah, I mean, even though I like I said, I live a pretty clean lifestyle. I made a joke on Instagram the other day. I took a picture of the tower and I'm like, it's an easy route, but it gets really hard after 20 times a day.
Exactly.
And I'm just climbing literally a ladder.
Yeah, totally. No, I painted a house last summer and for a friend of mine, and then like I had painted for like 3 days, and I was like, okay, I got Thursday, I'm going to go and try my project because I'll have rested for 3 days in my head because I wasn't climbing.
Because you were
like, I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm just going to, But I went out and it was like the worst day I'd had on the route in months.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, what the fuck is wrong? Oh, wait a minute. I climbed up and down ladders all day for 3 days. And it's like, it doesn't seem like it's a climber thing that it wouldn't make me tired, but it made me tired.
Yeah.
And I was like, my whole lower body was useless. So it's just kind of funny that, again, like how you sort of fit it all in and what you want out of it. I mean, if it's performance, then you have this whole other consideration. But if you're just more into like the adventure side of things and seeing new places, this sounds like a perfect setup.
Well, also, I mean, like I don't get to go to the gym at all while I'm on the road, but I get to work every day and I'm like strong and my endurance is like increasing a lot. So, I mean, one of my favorite workouts at the climbing gym is to find an easy route on auto belay and just stay on the wall as long as possible. Climb up it, climb down it, climb back up it, and just 15, 20 minutes on like a 5-6 at the gym or a 5-7 at the gym. And like that really gets you strong. And that's what I feel like I'm doing at work is that I'm just on an easy route all day long. Cause sometimes the boom lifts would be occupied. So if you, or like you can't get to where you need to get to in a boom. So you got to climb the tower. And they have these things called a yo-yo. It's like the auto belay, but you don't fall on them because they'll just jerk you to a stop. I wish they just had the auto belay where you could just be lowered slowly.
Yeah, you should introduce that maybe to the.
I don't think they're OSHA approved.
Oh, right.
But
they must be pretty close if they're using them in commercial gyms, you know?
Yeah,
there
but
you go.
It's like the exact same thing except it stops you, and so you can zoom up the tower real fast on that, and just climb up and just get to wherever you need to be. But all that is really strength training and weight training too, because I have all these, wrenches and hammers. I carry my 3-pound sledge on my.
That's so awesome. It's like a weight vest.
Yeah. So when I put all my trad gear on and I'm like getting racked up for a climb, like it's not as heavy anymore.
That's so awesome, man. Yeah, it's because it sounds pretty wild. I mean, is this like a sort of long-term thing? Are you going to keep moving up through what you're capable of doing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the company I work for really looks out for me, so I have a lot of loyalty for them. But there's all these other smaller companies that are trying to hire out from. So I have like literally endless opportunities, and they just get more and more. What I'd like to do is get into film production and stuff. Like when I was in the kitchen, I was just not making money, and I was always working weekends, and I was always working holidays, and I was struggling. I could never have fun. I watched my friends go climbing all the time, and I never got to join them. So now it's like a little bit more on my terms. And of course, I'm trying to like pay a lot of debts from the, ever since I got out of college, it's just been getting worse and worse and worse. I lived like a dirtbag lifestyle my whole life without even knowing I was doing it. I'm just trying to find something.
It wasn't as romanticized as it all gets in climbing.
Yeah.
When you're actually doing it.
Yeah.
Like, this kind of blows, actually.
Yeah. So now I like have a way I can actually feel successful. I'm gaining skills. I'm gaining certifications. I've got my OSHA 10 and stuff. So like I can show up to places and say I can work.
What are your climbing goals?
Really short-term goals I have, like this month I want to climb Super Crack at the New River Gorge. It's just 5'9", but it's 5'9" plus. It's 100 feet long, and it's at Beauty Mountain. It's an amazing crack. There's another one it says 10 or 11 because like nobody climbs down there at South Nuttall. There's like a 2-hour hike in or something, or 2 miles. 2-mile hike in. And you have to wrap in 100 feet, and there's this perfect 5'10" crack in the corner called Hyperactive. So I think if I could get those two done, Hyperactive was awesome. I did about half of it, and I got scared because this giant loose plate on one side of it, and my friend Adriel sent it without using the plate, but he wanted to go work on his project after that, so he worked on the beckoning, he finally got that too. But right after that loose plate goes into like this off-width section, and it's not too bad. It's only maybe like 10 feet long, and then you're back into a nice crack, and then there's this roof pull that goes around the corner. So I know I'm going to struggle on that roof pull, but if I can get those two routes, my 5-year goal was Half Dome, and that's coming up soon. So if I can climb 5, 10, or 11 at the New River Gorge, I think I can at least give a good solid attempt at Half Dome.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Erik for coming through, getting in touch, throwing down a really fun interview. You can find Erik at Erik Alleycat on Instagram. That's Erik with a K. But you know what? At this point, Erik's not really selling or promoting anything, which is kind of refreshing. He's like Lloyd Dobler. I don't want to sell, buy, or process anything for a career. I don't want to buy, process things, sell, bought things. I don't know how it goes. Say anything? That's an old-timey cut now. Yeah, check out Erik. Find him at your local crag. He might be looking for a partner. If he does get his print rag dreams together, I'll let you know here on the Enormocast. All right, folks. Next time you hear me, I'll be coming at you from either Portugal or Spain. Have a trip coming up with the family over there. And looking forward to it. Not ideal climbing season, I know, but we're not really there to climb. We'll probably get our fingers on some rock, but mostly there to do family, touristy, beachy stuff, that kind of thing. Eat nice food. You know what normal people do when they go on a trip. And also, I'm going to miss Lander. So, if you go to the International Climbing Festival, belly up to the bar and have one for me, won't you? And don't forget to check your knots.
His name is Crew.
Hey, good looking.
BMX is his world. Rad is his way of life.
The world would be a lot better off without kids.
We're here for the biggest and most important bicycle motocross event ever held, Hell Track.
This is a very important race.
The very finest riders in the country are here, riding for some $100,000.
Hell Track in this big town. They've got to be kidding. This is a joke.
I really think I can get this one. I think I've got a chance.
I don't want to hear any more about it.
Everyone's on his case.
Get that. The paperboy thinks he's a pro.
He's nothing next to Bart Taylor.
He's got the style.
There's something about the way you ride so naturally.
And he's going to prove it.
I've never seen such raw determination and talent in one kid.
Against the factory hotshots.
Looks like the local yokel's gonna race after all.
It's gonna take a miracle to beat this guy.
Against the big money fixers.
All you have to do is take out that kid.
Against impossible odds.
You scared now?
This guy doesn't even stand a chance.
Yeah, I am.
He's going for it all. Rad.